The neon sign outside Murphy's diner sputtered and flickered like it was clinging to life, splashing an unsteady wash of pink light over the near-empty parking lot. The air outside was thick with the scent of rain on asphalt, but inside, the fluorescent lights hummed in a constant, almost oppressive rhythm. They bathed the worn vinyl booths and cracked linoleum floors in a pale, clinical glow, a light too harsh for a place that had once thrived on warmth. The old wall clock ticked toward midnight, each second dragging like it was conspiring against the weary souls inside. Emily Martinez stood behind the counter, her sneakers squeaking on the floor as she moved between tables with an almost mechanical precision. 2 years of late-night shifts had trained her body to keep moving, even when her mind was somewhere else entirely. She poured coffee with one hand and wiped down tables with the other, her motions so practiced they could have been muscle memory. This wasn't a dream job, far from it. But it was a lifeline, barely strong enough to hold the weight of rent, bills, and her younger brother's tuition. That night, the diner was eerily quiet. Old Mr. Peterson was in his usual spot, hunched over his third refill, staring into his cup as if it might hold answers to questions he hadn't asked aloud in decades. Across the room, in the corner booth, sat a man who didn't belong there. Every detail about him screamed it. He had arrived about an hour earlier, slipping into the booth like someone claiming territory. Emily caught herself glancing at him more than once. The charcoal gray suit fit him too well to be off the rack, the shine on his leather shoes too perfect for someone passing through a forgotten diner at this hour. Most customers after 10 p.m. were truckers, factory workers fresh off the night shift, or folks nursing the tail end of a long night at the bar. But this man, this Daniel, as she would soon learn, looked like he belonged under chandeliers and crystal stemware, not hunched over a slice of apple pie that had been sitting in the case since Tuesday. When Emily approached with the coffee pot, he looked up from his phone, and she noticed his eyes, sharp and observant, but softened by something she couldn't quite place. "Please," he said, sliding his cup forward. "And call me Daniel." She gave a half smile. "Daniel, you're not from around here, are you?" A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. What gave it away? "Well," she said, gesturing at his suit, "nobody wears that in Murphy's unless they're coming from a funeral or a court date." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were measuring him. "And you've been watching everything, like you're writing a secret restaurant review." Daniel chuckled, and it was warm, genuine, not the polite kind people wear like a mask. "Guilty. I'm in the restaurant business. Sometimes I like to see how other places run." "At midnight on a Tuesday?" She raised a brow. "That's when you see the truth," he replied, taking a sip, then grimacing. "Though I'll admit, the coffee could use some help." Emily laughed, and it surprised her how easily it came. "Tell me about it. That machine's older than I am. Pete, the owner, swears it's fine as long as it still makes coffee. Between you and me, I think it's held together with duct tape and prayer." "You've been here long?" Daniel asked, his tone light but curious. 2 years, 3 months, and about 15 days, she said without hesitation. "Not that I'm counting. Planning your escape." Her smile faltered. "Something like that." She glanced around the diner at the peeling wallpaper and the seats patched with electrical tape. "This place has good bones. It just needs someone who actually cares." Daniel followed her gaze, seeing the place through her eyes. "Sounds like you care." "I care about paying my rent and keeping my brother in school," she said, her voice firm. Then softer, almost like she was admitting it to herself. "But, yeah, maybe I do care. My grandmother used to tell me stories about diners like this. Places where the coffee was always hot, the pie was fresh, and everybody knew your name. She said they were the heart of small towns." "She sounds like a wise woman." She was. Emily's voice grew distant. "She passed last year, cancer." She swallowed hard, as if pushing the grief back where it belonged. "She and my grandpa ran their own place once, the Sunset Café. Lost it when I was little. She never stopped talking about it, though. How it felt like home, How everyone had a usual. How it was more than just a business. It was a piece of the town's soul. Daniel leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. What happened? The usual, Emily said with a shrug that didn't hide the sting. Medical bills, the economy tanked, and some businessman who swooped in when they were desperate. She didn't talk about the details, but it broke her heart. Her eyes softened. She kept a few things from the café, some photos, a few pieces of her wedding china, and a gold coin from her mother. Said it was all she had left of the dream. I'm sorry, Daniel said quietly. Ancient history, she replied. But her voice caught just enough to betray her. She straightened her apron, masking the moment. Anyway, you should probably finish your pie before it fossilizes. Emily left Daniel's booth with a polite nod, telling him to wave if he needed anything else. She didn't notice the way his fingers tightened around the coffee cup, how his jaw tensed, or the shadow that crossed his expression. She was too wrapped in her own thoughts. About her grandmother's stories, about dreams that were crushed not by bad luck, but by people with power, people who could erase a lifetime's work with the stroke of a pen. The rest of the night unfolded in a muted rhythm. Mr. Peterson left his usual $1 tip and disappeared into the cool darkness outside. Emily moved through her closing routine with quiet efficiency, wiping tables, restocking condiments, locking up the register. But she couldn't ignore the subtle weight of Daniel's gaze. It wasn't invasive, but it was steady, as if he was trying to assemble a puzzle in his mind, and every piece somehow involved her. When she finally returned to his table with the check, Daniel was turning something over in his hand, a small circular object that caught the fluorescent light in fleeting, golden flashes. She set the slip beside his empty pie plate. $8.50, she said. He looked up at her with an unreadable expression. Emily, he said softly, surprising her that he'd remembered her name. You mentioned your grandmother's coin earlier. Can I ask what it looked like? The question felt odd, almost too pointed, but she humored him. Gold, about the size of a quarter, intricate carvings, flowers, vines, the kind of work you don't see anymore. Why? Daniel's face drained of color. Slowly, he opened his palm and revealed a coin that seemed to hum with familiarity under the harsh light. Emily's breath caught. It was exactly as she'd described. Same floral pattern, same warm, time-worn gold. Her knees went weak. Where did you get that? She whispered, her voice trembling. That's my grandmother's coin. It was buried with her. The words came out automatically, but as soon as she said them, something in her memory resisted. She remembered the funeral, the photograph in the casket, the wedding ring on her grandmother's finger. But the coin had been missing for years, long before her grandmother's death. She had always assumed it had been sold, another casualty of losing the Sunset Café. Daniel stared at the coin like it was burning his skin. I bought this years ago. An estate sale. I didn't know. You're tipping me with my grandmother's coin, Emily said, her voice sharpening, gaining strength. How is that even possible? Where did you really get this? The air between them tightened. The diner suddenly felt claustrophobic. Too bright, too loud, too small to hold the weight of the coincidence. Daniel's gaze darted between her and the coin. I need to make some phone calls, he said finally, his voice hoarse. No, Emily said, her voice low but unyielding. You don't get to walk away and make phone calls. I want answers. Now. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the coin, close enough to see every detail etched into the surface. This coin belonged to my great-grandmother, she said, her voice thick with memory. She brought it from Spain as part of her wedding dowry. My grandmother used to let me hold it when I was a kid, told me it stood for hope, for new beginnings. It's not just metal. It's our history. Daniel's shoulders slumped, the weight of her words pressing into him. He placed the coin on the table as though it had suddenly grown too heavy. Emily, I swear, I had no idea. I bought it at an estate auction about 5 years ago. There were boxes of items. Jewelry, china, even old restaurant equipment. The auctioneer said it was from a business liquidation. Her stomach went cold. What kind of business? He hesitated. I don't remember all the details. My family's company acquired several properties that year. When the owners couldn't meet their debts, their belongings were auctioned to recover losses. It was all handled through lawyers. We never met the families. Emily's voice cut sharp. Your family's company? Yes, he said quietly. What's its name? Daniel's mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like the word itself was dangerous. Westbrook Holdings. The name hit her like a fist to the gut. She staggered back, hand over her mouth. Oh my God, you're one of them. Emily. My grandmother used to spit when she said that name. She snapped, her voice rising enough for the night cook to glance through the kitchen window. Westbrook Holdings destroyed my family. They took our restaurant, our home, everything, and sold it off piece by piece. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping hard against the floor. I need to explain. Explain what? She shot back, eyes blazing. How you ended up with my great-grandmother's coin, how your family turned my grandparents' dreams into auction lots, how you're sitting here in a diner built on the ashes of our lives, critiquing our coffee while eating our pie. I didn't know about your family, Daniel said desperately. I swear. You were just what? Emily's voice trembled, equal parts fury and grief. Just slumming it? Just seeing how the other half lives? She snatched the coin from the table, curling her fingers around it like she could shield it from the past. For the first time all night, Daniel had nothing to say. Emily's voice was steady now, but each word cut like glass. This coin was supposed to be mine on my wedding day. My grandmother clung to it through the Great Depression, through every storm life threw at her. And your family, her jaw tightened, treated it like nothing, sold it off like a scrap of metal. Daniel's hand went through his hair, undoing the polished perfection he'd worn like armor all evening. His composure cracked, replaced by something raw. There has to be some mistake, he said, almost pleading. My father handled those acquisitions. He always said they were fair deals, that no one was mistreated. Emily let out a sound that was half laugh, half snarl. Fair? You call it fair when you buy someone's property for pennies while they're drowning in medical bills? When you pile on hidden fees?
Like old popcorn and gasoline. Greg's in the control booth, feeding in a group of escape room players. Teens. The TikTok kind. One of them's already filming. Naturally. I'm supposed to jump scare them halfway through their puzzle. Easy. Except, when they enter the room, they freeze. Teen girl. Who's that? I assume they mean me. Problem is, I'm in the shadows. Then I hear the giggle. Not mine. Not theirs. Then across the room I see what they're staring at. The fucking scream clown. Same creepy-ass melting face. Same weird-ass crooked smile. Same eyes like bottomless carnival rides to hell. Only now, he's holding a balloon with my fucking face on it. Me. Internal monologue. I should have worked at that stupid factory forever. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He just tilts his head. Every light in the warehouse then flickers off. Darkness. Then the creepiest shit I've ever heard, which at this point is saying something. Honk. Like a clown nose possessed by Satan's kazoo. The teens scream. I scream. You would have screamed too if you were there. Greg yells, "Cut the lights," from the booth. Lights go back to normal. The teens are gone. The balloon is still there, only now it has Greg's face in it. I ran. Full sprint. Whale flew off mid-jump over the cotton candy hair pile. I didn't stop until I got to my car and peeled out of there like a clown being chased by every regret of his adult life. This morning I woke up to this carved into my bedroom wall. You laughed. You stay. I think he's getting closer. I keep seeing balloons in my backyard. I don't even have trees. Last night I heard a knock on my window. I live on the 3rd floor. So yeah, I was a birthday party clown. Now I'm just a guy waiting for a punchline that might be me. I just woke up with a balloon animal tied around my neck. I live alone. So once again, here we go, honk honkers. So things have gone from mildly haunted clown trauma to full-blown, someone's gonna find my body face down in a cream pie. Actual cream pie. I know how you dirty-minded fuckers are. After the escape room incident, I started sleeping with the lights on. I also duct-taped every window shut, threw away my microwave, long story, and burned the Chuckles suit for a second time. I even saged my apartment, though I'm 95% sure I just lit cinnamon incense and coughed for 40 minutes. Did it help? Absolutely fucking not, because last night my Alexa said, "Do you want to hear a joke?" Me, half asleep. No. Alexa, well, he does. Then she played clown music, backwards. Do you know how much clown music already sounds cursed when played forward? It was like someone set a carousel on fire and recorded its dying screams. Now I thought maybe I was just losing my mind. Like, okay, maybe I am just a washed-up party clown with a guilt complex and a sleep deficit. However, that's when I got a call from Officer Marquez. She was the responding.
Emily, alone with a coin and a past she suddenly understood more clearly than ever before. Outside, Daniel sat in his car for 20 long minutes, staring at his phone, his reflection pale in the windshield. The steering wheel was icy under his grip. The silence pressed against him like deep water. Finally, he dialed. "Marcus, I need every file we have on acquisitions from 2018 to 2020. Property transfers, liquidations, auctions, all of it. On my desk by morning." "Sir, it's almost 1. "I don't care. Priority 1. He hung up, the weight in his chest making it hard to breathe. Sleep was impossible. Hours later, he found himself in his father's old study, the smell of leather and old paper wrapping around him like a shroud. Stacks of boxes filled the room. Years of deals. Every line recorded in Arthur Westbrook's meticulous handwriting. Somewhere in here was the truth about the Sunset Café. It took 3 hours to find the manila folder. Martinez property acquisition. Complete, the neat script read. Inside were contracts, letters, photographs, evidence so cold and clinical it made Daniel's blood run colder with every page. There was a photograph of the restaurant in its prime. Yellow awnings, window boxes overflowing with flowers, sunlight catching on clean glass. Another of Rosa and Miguel Martinez, Emily's grandparents, smiling in a newspaper clipping celebrating their 20th anniversary in business. Then, the letters. Daniel's hands shook as he read his father's correspondence with the company's lawyers. The strategy was laid out without shame. Miguel's heart attack in March 2019 had left him unable to work for months. Medical bills mounted instantly. Standard procedure, Arthur had written. Offer assistance in the form of a loan with accelerated terms. When default occurs, acquire property at adjusted market value. Liquidate assets to recoup costs. Daniel's stomach churned. This wasn't business. It was predation. Worse still, when the family tried to renegotiate, Arthur added penalties and interest designed to suffocate them financially. When they pleaded for more time, foreclosure began. When they lost the restaurant, Westbrook Holdings moved on their personal possessions. The auction list was merciless. Rosa's wedding china, Miguel's postcard collection, kitchen tools worn by decades of use, and buried among the jewelry listings. One antique gold coin, Spanish origin, estimated value $200 to $300. $200. The price tag for a family's last piece of hope. Emily's great-grandmother's dowry, the only surviving relic of her family's hope and heritage. had been appraised for less than Daniel often spent on a business lunch. That insult alone stung, but it was the final paper in the folder that pierced him completely. A letter, handwritten in delicate script, its edges yellowed with time, sat atop the stack. "Mr. Westbrook," it began, "I am writing to beg you one more time to—" Restless shadows over the gathered company. Lady Elmridge sat pale and trembling in a high-backed chair, her gloved hands clasped tightly around the armrests. Beside her, Inspector Lestrade loomed, his stern expression tempered with the curiosity of a man finally sensing the end of a long chase. At the center of the room, Sherlock Holmes stood with the poise of a man who had already resolved every knot in the tangled skein before him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Holmes began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of finality, "it is time that the veil is lifted. The affair of the golden locket has been a case of human vanity, fear and greed, one that cost a man his life and nearly ruined another's reputation. What began as a petty act of blackmail became a fatal trap, meticulously woven by one who has walked in this very house for decades, unseen yet ever watchful." He turned sharply toward the stoic figure of Matthew Keene, the butler, who stood near the doorway, his face unreadable. "Mr. Keene, your long service to this household masked a deep resentment," Holmes said. "You knew the locket's history better than anyone. A relic of Lady Elmridge's youth, it contained a miniature portrait and a note, evidence of a love affair long past, the discovery of which would have stirred whispers through the drawing rooms of London. You, who bore the slight of a lifetime spent in servitude, saw in it a weapon and an opportunity." Keene did not speak, but his hands twitched ever so slightly. "It was not you who first set this chain in motion," Holmes continued, his voice a precise scalpel. "That misfortune fell to Thomas Finch, a small-time blackmailer with ambitions beyond his wit. He attempted to extort Lady Elmridge, using the maid, Clara, as his go-between. But you, Keene, were the spider at the center of the web. You encouraged the maid's fear, let Finch take the risk, and then, when the time was right, you lured him to his death by the river." Lestrade shifted uneasily. "Holmes, the man swears the fellow slipped." "I have no doubt he will continue to claim as much," Holmes interrupted, "and perhaps, in the eyes of the law, it shall remain a matter of misadventure. But I have walked that embankment, and I know the mark of a struggle when I see it. Finch went there expecting payment. Keene ensured he never returned." I could not suppress a shiver at Holmes's cold precision. The butler's impassive facade finally cracked. His lips thinned, and he cast a slow glance at Lady Elmridge, whose gaze was fixed on the floor. "Your motive, Keene," Holmes pressed, "was never money alone. It was the satisfaction of holding power over those who had treated you as furniture in your own home. To destroy Finch and silence the maid was a simple matter. To see Lady Elmridge brought to the brink of ruin, that was the triumph you savored. But you miscalculated in one respect." Holmes strode to the mantel and didn't sleep that night. She sat on the narrow fire escape outside her apartment, the cool air wrapping around her as she turned the coin over and over in her palm. It had grown warm from her touch, the intricate carvings catching the early light. She could almost feel her great-grandmother's presence in its weight, like a hand resting gently over hers. Her phone buzzed. A message from her brother, Jake. "M. The bursar's office called again. If they don't get the tuition by Friday, I'm out. $3,000. That was the number that now stood between Jake and the engineering degree their grandparents had once dreamed of for their children. Emily closed her eyes and rested her head against the brick wall. She'd been scrambling for weeks, taking every extra shift, selling what little she owned. But the math never worked in her favor. The next evening, she trudged into Murphy's diner, the coin a solid, comforting weight in her apron pocket. The familiar scent of frying grease and burnt coffee should have felt like home, but now it only reminded her of everything she'd lost. "You look like hell," Carmen, the other night waitress, said as Emily tied her apron. Just the usual, Emily muttered. Carmen raised a skeptical brow. Come on, girl. Is it Jake's tuition again? Emily's composure cracked. It's everything, Carmen. The tuition, the rent, this place. She gestured to the worn booths, the flickering lights, the tired wallpaper. I hate it here. I hate pouring coffee that tastes like motor oil and pretending to smile at people who don't even see me. And I hate that at 24, this is my life. Carmen leaned on the counter, her weathered face full of quiet understanding. Honey, we all start somewhere. No, you don't get it. Emily's voice wavered. This isn't just a job. This building, it's built on my family's grave. My grandparents owned a restaurant here, the Sunset Café. It was beautiful. Yellow awnings, flowers in the windows, food made with love. They lost it all because of medical bills and people who knew how to bleed them dry. And now I'm working in its shadow, serving reheated pie to people who couldn't care less. Carmen's eyes softened. Emily, I didn't know. The worst part? I'm good at this, Emily admitted, her throat tight. I love making people feel welcome, being part of something that matters. But Murphy's? It's just a stop for people passing through. She wiped at her eyes. And now Jake might have to drop out because I can't keep up. Have you asked Pete for a raise? Carmen offered gently. Emily laughed bitterly. Pete thinks 50 cents an hour is generous. Last week he told me if I didn't like the pay, there were plenty of other girls who'd take the job for less. The dinner rush was slow. Every empty booth another reminder that the night's tips wouldn't come close to what she needed. Emily watched the clock crawl toward closing, the numbers dragging her toward a truth she didn't want to face. No matter how hard she worked, she was still going to be short. The math was cruel and unshakable, each calculation ending in the same place, nowhere. Around 10:30, Emily was refilling the salt shakers when she caught sight of a figure in the corner booth. Daniel. He looked nothing like the man who had first walked into the diner days ago. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, dark stubble shadowed his jaw. His eyes were red-rimmed, heavy with exhaustion. He sat hunched over, not with the arrogance she'd once assumed, but with the posture of a man carrying too much weight. Her first instinct was to tell him to get the hell out, to throw his presence back into the night where it belonged. But something about the slump of his shoulders made her pause. I told you not to come back, she said quietly as she approached. I know. His voice was low, roughened. He didn't look up. I couldn't stay away. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, Emily said sharply. Your family destroyed mine. End of story. It's not the end, Daniel said, finally lifting his gaze to meet hers. Emily, I've been going through my father's files. What he did to your grandparents, it was worse than I thought. Deliberate, calculated, cruel, designed to strip them of everything. You think I don't know that? Her words came fast, hot with years of stored pain. I lived through the aftermath. I watched my grandmother cry herself to sleep because she couldn't afford to fix her dentures. I watched my grandfather die thinking he was a failure because he couldn't protect us. I've been living in the shadow of your father's cruelty my entire life. Daniel's expression tightened, as though her words had struck him physically. I found the letter your grandmother wrote to my father. She begged him to let her keep the coin. She offered to work, clean offices, anything to earn it back. He refused. Her hand instinctively went to her apron pocket where the coin rested, the solid reassurance of its weight grounding her. Of course he refused. People like your father don't understand that some things aren't for sale. They don't understand that crushing someone's hope is worse than stealing their money. I want to make it right, Daniel said, the urgency in his voice almost pleading. You can't fix this, Emily replied, her voice starting to crack. You can't bring my grandparents back. You can't give me the childhood I lost. You can't erase the years of struggle. You can't make my brother's tuition payment or turn this sorry excuse for a diner into the kind of place my family would be proud of. Daniel froze at that. Your brother's tuition. She cursed herself inwardly for saying too much. It's none of your business. Emily, please let me. Head gravely. You have chosen well, Mrs. Ainsworth. Sit down and tell us everything from the beginning with as much detail as you can recall. It is often the smallest particulars that prove most illuminating. She obeyed, and as the firelight flickered across her troubled features, she began her tale. It concerns a ring, a black ring, or rather, I should say, the obsidian ring. It is a family piece, centuries old, carved from a single volcanic stone and set with 3 tiny diamonds in the form of a crescent. It came to me after the passing of my late husband, Edward Ainsworth, some 2 years ago. I was told it was of no great monetary value, though rare in its craftsmanship, but in my husband's family it bore a certain reputation. They called it the widow's circle, for it had belonged in succession to 3 women who all became widows under circumstances that were, well, tragically similar. Watson that I am, I could not suppress an involuntary shiver at her words. Holmes merely steepled his fingers and watched her keenly. "Go on, madam," he said. "2 nights ago," she continued, "I discovered the ring missing from my dressing table. I thought at first I had mislaid it, but yesterday morning it was returned, placed upon my pillow while I slept. And this morning," her voice faltered, "this morning I found a note pinned to my door. It bore no signature, only 5 words, 'The last widow waits.'" There was a tense silence in the room, broken only by the patter of rain against the window. Holmes's eyes had grown sharper, his expression alive with interest. "A most singular affair," he murmured. "The loss of the ring, the anonymous return, the cryptic message. These are the work of a mind both deliberate and theatrical. Tell me, Mrs. Ainsworth, who resides in your household?" She hesitated, then replied, "My maid, Alice, my butler, Mr. Griggs, and, for the last 3 months, my late husband's cousin, Mr. Julian Ainsworth, who assists in the management of the estate. He was most insistent that I part with the ring, claiming it brought ill luck." Holmes rose and began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "And your husband's death? May I inquire as to the circumstances?" "A hunting accident, or so they said. His horse bolted near Richmond Park, and he was thrown." She lowered her gaze. "Yet he was an excellent rider. I've never entirely reconciled myself to the official account." Holmes paused by the mantelpiece, his keen gaze fixed on the leaping flames. "Mrs. Ainsworth, you are right to come. I should like to inspect your residence at the earliest possible hour. There are forces at play here that suggest both malice and calculation. If we do not intervene swiftly, the 4th widow may indeed be inevitable." The poor lady caught her breath, and for the first time her composure wavered. "Then you believe me in danger, Mr. Holmes?" Holmes turned to her, and in the quietest, most assured tone he said, You expect me to believe it's just some cosmic coincidence that I ended up working for the family that ruined my life? Emily, please, just listen." "No, you listen." Her tears came hot and fast, streaking down her cheeks. "Do you have any idea what it's like working here, in this place, knowing my grandparents' dream once stood on this street and was ripped away? Do you know how many nights I've stood here, wondering what their restaurant smelled like, if customers laughed while they ate, if my grandmother hummed to herself while she cooked?" Daniel's face had gone pale, his own voice caught somewhere between shame and desperation. Emily pointed at him with a trembling finger, her whole body taut with rage. "And you?" "You've been sitting here judging the coffee, criticizing the service, playing the role of some restaurant connoisseur, when all along you're the reason this place is falling apart. You're the reason the coffee machine is held together with duct tape. You're the reason the booths are splitting at the seams. You're the reason I work myself to the bone for wages that don't even cover rent." Daniel's hands lifted, almost in surrender. "I never wanted this. I inherited the company, the properties, everything. I didn't choose any of it." "Oh, spare me," Emily snapped, her voice breaking under the weight of fury and betrayal. "You didn't choose? You're 35 years old, Daniel. You've had years to choose. You could have sold this place, given it back to the community, done something to make up for what your family did. Instead, you kept it as an investment and paid someone else to wring every penny out of it while you counted the profits. She ripped the apron from her waist and threw it at his feet. Do you know what the worst part is? I actually liked you. When you first came in here, I thought you were different. I told you about my grandmother, about her dreams, and you sat there nodding, pretending you understood. All the while, you were the enemy I've been fighting my entire life. Daniel stepped forward, his voice pleading. Emily, I want to make this right. Let me pay for your brother's tuition. Let me... Stop! Her scream ricocheted through the empty diner. Stop trying to buy your way out of this. Do you think you can write a check and erase the fact that my grandfather died believing he was a failure? That my grandmother spent her last years cleaning strangers' houses because your family took her restaurant and her dignity? She pulled the coin from her pocket, holding it high so it caught the harsh light above them. You carried this for 5 years like a lucky charm. My great-grandmother's wedding dowry, reduced to a trinket in your pocket. Do you know what it means to us? It's not gold, it's hope, legacy, the promise that we'd rise above what was done to us. Daniel's voice was barely a breath. I never meant... You never meant what? To get caught? To have to look one of your father's victims in the eye? Her laugh was sharp, humorless. Your father knew exactly what he was doing. And you inherited his empire and kept playing the same game. She went to the register, scooped up her meager tips, wrinkled bills, scattered coins, and threw them at his feet. Here, take it back. It's your money anyway. The wages you pay me, the tips from your customers, it all flows back to Westbrook Holdings. Emily, please. I'm done, she said, her voice suddenly cold, controlled. Done with this job, done with you, done carrying the weight of your family's sins. Find yourself another victim. I quit. She turned toward the door, but his voice stopped her. What if I gave it all back? Her hand froze on the handle. What? The diner, the building, the whole block. What if I signed it all over to you? No strings, no payments, no conditions. What if you had the chance to rebuild something your grandparents would be proud of? She turned slowly, eyes burning with disbelief. Why would you do that? His voice was low, almost broken. Because carrying your coin didn't bring me luck. It brought me to you, and maybe that's what it was always meant to do. Emily stood frozen, the first faint blush of dawn spilling through the glass door. You're lying, she whispered, but the certainty was gone from her voice. People like you don't just give away millions in property. Daniel reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. This is the letter your grandmother wrote to my father, the one where she begged him to let her keep the coin. He set it gently on the counter. I've been carrying it since last night. Every word feels like a knife. Emily approached as if it might burn her. She unfolded the letter with shaking hands, recognizing the familiar curves of her grandmother's handwriting. By the time she finished, her cheeks were wet. She wrote this. Her voice was barely audible. She never told me. She probably didn't want you to know how much it hurt, Daniel said softly. Some pain's too deep to share. Emily sank into the nearest booth, clutching the letter. Why show me this? Why torture us with what can't be changed? Because it can be changed, Daniel said, sliding in across from her. Not the past, you're right. I can't undo that. But the future is still ours to decide. You can't just give me a building and call it even, she said, though her voice lacked its earlier bite. Guilt doesn't work that way. This isn't guilt, he replied firmly. It's justice. Your grandmother's coin led me here, to you, to the truth. Do you think it's an accident I ended up in this diner with your family's heirloom in my pocket? Emily looked down at the coin resting in her palm. I don't believe in fate. Neither did I, until 3 days ago. His gaze was steady now. I've been running my father's empire for 10 years without once asking if it was right. But watching you work, seeing the kindness you give to every customer, it reminded me what business is supposed to be. Serving people, not exploiting them. You're talking about a partnership, Emily said slowly. No, Daniel corrected. I'm talking about you taking the lead. This is your family's neighborhood, your grandmother's legacy. The Sunset Café should rise again, and it should be yours. I'll fund it, but I won't control it. Emily turned the coin over in her fingers. She used to tell me about the old café, how they stayed open late for kids who needed a place to study, how they fed people during the blizzard of '78, even when they were losing money. That's what this place could be again. But not with you as my partner. No Westbrook money, no involvement, just the deed, free and clear. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand, but rebuilding will take capital. How will you? I'll figure it out, she said, her voice growing steadier. Loans, investors, crowdfunding, working 3 jobs if I have to. My grandparents built it from nothing once. I can do it again. What about your brother's tuition? It'll have to wait. Some dreams are worth the sacrifice. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. The transfer will be done by week's end. Emily studied him. Just like that? Just like that. But can I ask one thing? What? When you rebuild, will you put the coin somewhere people can see it, with a plaque that tells the story, the loss and the recovery? To remind them some things are worth more than money. Emily looked at the coin, now seeing not just its gold and intricate carvings, but the resilience it represented. I'll put it behind the register, framed with the whole story. She stood, smoothing her uniform for the last time. What happens to you now? Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe I'll learn the difference between inheriting wealth and earning it. Maybe I'll finally build something that helps people instead of exploiting them. At the door, Emily paused. The coin didn't bring you bad luck. It brought you a chance to be better than your father. Don't waste it. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped out into the dawn, the coin warm in her palm, her grandmother's letter safe in her pocket. Behind her, the tired diner waited for its transformation. Ahead, the sun rose on a new chapter. 3 months later, the sign above the door read, Sunset Café, established 1962, reborn 2025. Behind the register, framed in glass, the gold coin caught the morning light, surrounded by photographs of 2 smiling elders who had never stopped believing that some dreams are strong enough to survive even the darkest nights.